Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Again, to this segment, the Oregon Voters Digest, I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. And by George, we've got a lot of work to do, folks. We've got a lot of work to do. And, you know, if you're following on the event down at the Capitol on the 6th, that was a very interesting thing. But we've always been having interesting things over the last 4 years. You know, this whole idea of trying to find some leadership, if you will, to take us to the next generation, for that matter. But the fact of the matter is, we're moving on. And we just recently had an inauguration. And as you note, that was scheduled. In fact, we were going to look like we were scheduled to have two inaugurations. One with former President. What's his name now? I mean, okay. Well, it's kind of tough nowadays to remember those names aspect of it. But anyway, but the bottom line is that there's no kidding aspect of it. But the fact of the matter is, we were looking at the possibility of having two inaugurations, if you will. Our president, who was sitting in that seat and was having some issues. But the fact of the matter is, he spent 4 years there. He was there. He did some things, and you know. And then now we've got a new date now. We've got a new elected president, and we're going to go through that situation. We're going to talk more about the politics at a later date, but this time around, we're just going to let things kind of settle down a bit, if you will, and maybe next week we can get into what does the newly president Biden, if you will, has to present, and where we are, if you will. Because at this point in time, things are sort of still in a confused state. So what we're doing in this particular show, we've got a new guest host, a new guest host, Liz Taylor, and I've been knowing Liz for a number of years. She's been very active in her community, and she just lived right down the street when I was living up there on Gant Mine, and that was kind of an interesting piece. But she's well knowledge, and she knows the community. And she's been to the East Coast, she's been to the West Coast, she's been all over the place. But so it's going to be a pleasure having her on as we go through through this maze that we're looking at this point in time, which is very, very important to get different kinds of individuals. And naturally, you've seen Jack before. Jack's been on, and I told you before, he's kind of like the elected official, because I met him, if you will, when he was running for office, when he was running for city council, and I was running for the mayor's slot. And he was the only person of all those folks that actually reached out to me. And then I found out his background, and I said, "Oh, I see why now." You know. And so we are both military. He's military too, aspect of it. Very important piece, if you will, as far as this country is concerned. So the name of the game is that he's well knowledgeable also too. So I thought what we do is that, and I was thinking about Liz is here for the first time around, and we'll just kind of bring. I will ask each of them, what do they feel after going through this 4 years? When we're going through this 4 years of late, we got, as you know, said, we got the vaccine situation, we got this, that, and the other. But I'm just going to ask them. We're just going to have just kind of a chat, if you will, and then the following after the break, we're going to get in and we are going to introduce you to this dynamic young lady. I call her the what am I thinking about? I'm a golfer, the young golfer. I don't want to think about Tiger Woods. But I tell you, this lady is kind of like the new Tiger Woods. She hit such a long ball that first day on that podium. And by George, I tell you, everybody was watching. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I Google her, and boy, I tell you, there's so much background and so much good stuff that everybody. I mean, if you're anybody, you can relate. There's something for everybody in her background. I mean, it was just a beautiful situation. So I'm really, really looking forward to spending more time. And for the benefit of those, if you want to get a little head start on that piece, just Google it. If you got a phone, that means you got some history. Just Google her name. And then, again, that's Amanda Gorman, and she'll just come all over the place. And if you got a TV and if you want to Google it on your TV too, you can do that too. You can do Amanda Gordon and YouTube, and she'll come all over the place aspect of it. Right. So we're not going to, there's no way in the world I could cover all of that at one point in time. So take your time, if you will. So with that, I'm just going to go on. We're going to start off in all due respect. I'm going to show you how it's done in terms of these pros that are sitting up here right now. I'll tell you, we'll give Jack the order to start with and say, Jack, what do you think over the last 4 years? Because we're getting ready to go into a new era, if you will. Well, what do you think? What impact has happened?
Well, Bruce, to be candid, I think that we've had 4 years of polarizing rhetoric and I'm very disappointed on what's happened over the last 4 years. You mentioned Amanda Gorman. I guess the way I would start it out and actually say is, I remember speeches that the late President John Kennedy made that were inspiring. The late Reverend Martin Luther King, that his speech, I Have a Dream, still, when I see it on YouTube, still brings tears to my eyes. The inspiring speeches by President Obama. But this young lady's inauguration speech was exceptional, beyond exceptional. And I was absolutely overwhelmed by not just the way she delivered it, but the words and the thoughts behind it. I particularly liked the fact that she started out addressing it as to Americans and the world. It was a speech that was inclusive. It was a speech that she told later in an interview that she researched going back at another divisive time in history when the United States was in the midst of a civil war, reading the speeches of Abraham Lincoln and trying to look for ways to heal the wounds from that war. Unfortunately, we haven't had a formal civil war like we did in 1860, 1865, but we have come dangerously close. And that saddens me because as a veteran, I've served with men and women around the world. I've served with men and women of all races, educations, backgrounds. And the only thing we were concerned about was protecting one another. I was just absolutely impressed with Amanda Gorman. The only other thing I would say, I realize that we have a lot of issues facing the nation, whether it's COVID or the economy, and these are major issues as well as foreign policy as well. But I am encouraged that we have so far overwhelming support for all but one member of the appointees by President Biden. And there are questions that people have about his previous performance. This is the Director of Homeland Security, which to me are valid questions to ask that aren't polarizing or political questions to try and score points. And we need to get away from what I call clickbait news. We need to get into news that dissects the issues and understands how we can come together to bring people together to stop the division that has occurred over the last 4 years and realistically going back prior to those 4 years.
Hey, Liz, I tell you what, why don't you come in and what you can do is that, let's say that for the last 4 years, for instance, let's say day one, if you will, and then when you got into the politics, when politics was introduced to the media, if you will, and then all of a sudden we were going through all kinds of changes and whatever. What were your thoughts during that particular time? Can you talk to that?
Well, over the last 4 years, my major concerns have been gentrification, education, and I focus mostly on, and I'm focusing right now on a small community in Oregon, Northeast Portland, the albino community, seeing the gentrification and thought it would never happen to me. Could never happen to me. My parents owned 56 years owned their home, but gentrification hit me. Think about education, how all of a sudden I'm doing some research and I find out that Oregon is the number one state in the United States with the highest high school dropout rate. And then as I research more, I find out that, the community is just completely, the Black community is completely disconnected when it was once a model cities program recognized by the Congress, recognized with the affirmative action policies that helped Northeast Portland to be put on the map as a viable, a growing economics a city to be proud of, a neighborhood to be proud to be a part of. There's a lot of other things. There's a lot of other things that concern me with, but right now I'm researching, and I'm still researching, and thanks to you, I'm coming up with the answers to, and the people who, and the reasons why, and the times when. So we're not through. We're just getting started, but we don't need to talk no more. We're through talking. It's time for action, Jackson.
I like that. Well, tell me this. During that particular time, you're thinking about some of your history, and I know you were there, and you knew some of those other active members. You remember the Neil Goldsmith, if you will.
Well,
what do you think about Neil doing this?
A lot like our new vice president. I was bused miles away from my neighborhood school, which is now called titled King Elementary School. At that time, it was named Highland Elementary School. We were one of the major schools, only schools in Northeast Portland. So I was bused miles away. I was bused miles away from my community, as were thousands of other Black kids that lived in the Northeast Portland community. I went to Whitaker Elementary School. And from there, I went to Grant High School, and it was crazy because I had two brothers and a sister that also were bused. But we all, when we came out of from elementary school, we all went to different high schools. My sister went to Madison. My brother went to Cleveland. Another sister went to Jefferson, and I went to Grant. But going to Grant, I had a really good time with Grant. In fact, I looked at my yearbooks from Grant High School. And I mean, you would not, looking at the yearbooks from 69 through 72, there is a completely gentrification that's taken its course. And it's almost an extermination of African Americans in Northeast Portland, especially when I looked at the yearbook, and then I went back and I looked at the demographics from then and today, and found out that Northeast Portland, right now we're probably, we're like 1% population, 1% population in the whole daggone state. And but at that time, I also was successful, very active in drama. I was a thespian at Grant. I was one of the first Black cheerleaders elected by the varsity, elected by the student body. From there, I went to Portland State University. I was denied entrance. I was denied entrance to Lewis and Clark College because of they said because of the GPA. All I know is I got a Dear John, one of those Dear John letters. We regret to inform you. I've always wanted to be an attorney. So in the meantime, I took a year off and then was admitted to Portland State University for 5 years, studied political science. I studied in the legislature. I was one of the first legislative interns working with Senator Bill McCoy, and he just turned me loose. And once there, I finished Portland State with a 3.7 GPA and was recruited by Xerox. And but in the meantime, I've worked many affirmative action. That was the height of affirmative action also when I had these opportunities. But from there, I worked with the Northeast Youth Service Center, where I located jobs for Black youth and hired them and paid their salaries. However, that program was my research tells us that the funds were misappropriated, and Oregon's slap on the wrist was just to stop the program. This was in 1979. So at the same time period in 1979, when Black youths in Northeast Portland could no longer receive funds or be hired in any kind of position, you had that's when crack hit the neighborhood in 79. So we see what happens from there. So I have had quite, from there I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I was in Atlanta, Georgia for 28 years. And coming back to Portland when mom and dad were sick. Lost my dad in '08. Who was Booker T. Taylor was one of the most, he was a very popular and fun
Yes, he was.
person. And then my mother, Helen P. Taylor, she was a nurse. In fact, she, I don't know how she managed her household the way she did with 5 kids, because our household was kind of like Bebe's kids. But we all had a great time. We all had our own friends. We had a beautiful, beautiful home to this day that ended up, I don't know how it happened, through some policy called transfer of death deed. One of my siblings, who is not living today, 2015 took out this death deed, even though there were wills. But we had to go through the court to try to hold on to the house. And the judge, he never even gave us an opportunity. He never even looked at the case. It's like he already had his mind made up that the house was going to be sold. So here I am today, and still researching.
Right.
I think my latest topic is taxation without representation, because I want to know who put me on a 33% tax bracket for 30 years.
I think that was great. But anyway, Liz, you like I said, now you're reflecting and you're giving folks a little flavor about the community that you were living in. I wasn't born and raised here.
Oh, we had a ball in the Albina. We had a ball. We had the Peninsula Park, Irvington Park.
Yes.
I mean, but we were white people, but we were, we're minorities. The white kids were our friends. We were friends until
What was the breakoff point?
Once the breakoff point for me was once I left high school, and then once I left college, and then once I retired.
Okay.
Best friends in elementary school, I had some best friends in high school. I had few friends in very few in college, but then I had best friends again on the workforce, until I found out that even though we were equal, I couldn't understand how I was, always number 1 rep. I always finished in the top, President's Club qualified, but I couldn't figure out why my peers took home 30 to 50% more money than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I researched back, I found out it had to do with the tax bracket and the credit issues that stem from when I was a child, redlining, rezoning the community, predatory lenders. I had no idea at that time. When I was younger, I didn't know that this was going on, because my parents never let go, and because we experienced the same fun and everything, and like the white kids did. But there was a major difference once I became, once I retired.
Okay. What did Vanport do to you? Were you there during that particular time?
No, I was born in 1954. Vanport, the fourth club was in 48. Okay. But I was the first. Okay. I was the first born in my family. I was the first. Mm-hmm. I was the first grandbaby, great grandbaby, mom and dad's first to be born after the flood. So I would hear a lot of stories. Funny stories about Vanport, but I'll tell you who really who I was impressed with telling the story vividly was Jackie.
Jackie Winters?
Yes.
Okay.
Jackie Winters. She was one. Jackie Winters was one of my mentors when I worked in the legislature. She was just an assistant to Frank Roberts at the time.
Right.
She was his personal assistant, and she groomed me, how to walk, how to talk, when to shut up, how to dress. But she also, we talk about Charles Jordan. I was a very, very active member from childhood, from birth, with Bethel AME Church in Portland, Oregon. And with Bethel AME Church, we had some dynamic leaders.
Yes.
Leaders like Charles Jordan. Charles Jordan would groom me every Sunday. I would see him every Sunday, and he would spend at least 10, 15 minutes with me after church talking about, so Liz, what's going on in the legislature now? What's going on in the legislature now? And I couldn't believe one Sunday he came to me and asked me, what's going on with the legislature? And I said, do you know that there was a time, it's written in the Oregon Constitution, that blacks could not enter into contractual agreement? And then the Constitution went on to spell out mulattoes, define mulattoes as 10% black blood. And I read on and on and on. And he looked at me. He gave me a look like, okay. It was just like, okay. And he never gave me any feedback on that. But he kept asking me every Sunday after church. He kept asking me, so what's going on in the legislature now? And I started telling him about the bills that I had opportunity to walk through the legislative process. One of my favorite people in the legislature was, in my second legislative session, was Calvin Henry. Calvin Henry, and he tells me today, he's still my mentor today. I still consult with him on certain things, along with Daryl Milner, who's like, he's like the god of history, of Black history, and especially in the state of Oregon.
Oregon history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, Calvin Henry pulled me to the side. One of the second senator I worked for was Mary Roberts, who was the daughter of Frank Roberts.
Right.
And she had her secretary take me to lunch one day. And secretary asked me, well, Liz, what do you think? Well, and I'm a senior right now. She said, what do you think you want to do when you graduate? I said, well, probably just run for office because I don't know anything else. He went back and told me, I didn't know anything about campaigning or anything, like that, but I knew how to walk a bill through the legislative process. I knew my competitors were the lobbyists. I knew in order to even get information through, you had to win friends and influence people. I mean, Dale Carnegie was my favorite author in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You got to be friends and nice. Everybody wants you to be nice. I mean, we just have to, everybody, just be nice and honest. But I've learned that, man, this world is I don't know how we got twisted. And at the rate we're going, unless we get these kids back into school and teach them a working curriculum, it looks like we're headed for trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, look here. I tell you what. Now, folks, now you can understand why we reached out to Liz. She's gonna work real well here among these guys, because we didn't have someone like her. But I think she's gonna be. I think I can get the okay and the nod from Jack. He's already given me a nod as it is, and I think Bob is looking at the show. And some of the other folks that were on, and they all know who you are, Liz. And to the community who hasn't been here as long as we have, this will be good, because we too are having our issues here in the Portland metropolitan area, or if not that, Oregon. Since this is the largest city in the state of Oregon, it's going to be very, very important that the leadership has to come in many ways from this particular era. So with that, what we're going to do now, folks, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to go and visit this other laureate, because we've already heard Liz, our laureate, here. So with that, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the Oregon Voters Digest. As you note, Kiz Taylor and Jack Kerfoot and I are I've been talking a little bit about sort of introducing Liz, making sure that Portland's involved in this situation, because that's really what we're talking about, really realistically. We're trying to bring it back. We're trying to rejuvenate. We're trying to bring it back. We got to bring back the City of Roses. And this is very, very important that we start at the lead, okay? We just got a newly elected president of these United States. Donald Trump was the prior, but I mean, there's a history there. Like I said, we're going to talk about that in our next show. But right now, what we want to do, we want to talk about the presenters at the inaugural address. And as I indicated before, we're gonna talk to Amanda Gorman. She was a poet, if you will, and it had several poets before in the past with others. But at the same time, I'm saying to you, Google her name, and there's all kinds of material about who she is and why, and all these other folks and whatever. But what we want to do, we want to get down and just kind of throw out some. We're going to throw an interview with Anderson Cooper of CNN, because CNN now is in, and Fox is on the other end. Okay, so that's okay. You know what I mean? But the bottom line is that media play a major role, as you know, in the presidency aspect of it, and being a part of the whole situation. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to do that piece. So we're going to do Anderson Cooper. He interviewed her, and at the same time, she also spoke about the speech at the event. Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to come back, and then we're going to get Jack and Liz and I will just kind of respond back to what we felt and what it brought to us as far as Oregonians are concerned, because we're here in Portland, Oregon, and what impact it will have here. Okay, with that, let's go on and run that piece, Steve.
Sometimes it's hard to put a moment like the one we as a country are in right now into words, but today an extraordinary 22-year-old poet did just that. Amanda Gorman is her name. She recited a poem that she wrote for this day, The Hill We Climb. I spoke to her a few moments ago, but first, here's some of what she said today.
When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
Amanda Gorman, it is such a pleasure. First of all, how do you feel?
I feel just so overjoyed and so grateful and so humbled. You know, I came here to do the best with the poem that I could, and to just see the support that's been pouring out, I literally can't absorb it all. So I'll be processing it for a while.
Can you just explain why this message today? How did you go about crafting this?
Right. Well, you know, I did a lot of research ever since I found out in late December that I was going to be the inaugural poet. So that was making sure I read all of the previous inaugural poems, really doing a deep literature dive of other orators who I look up to, whether it be Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, and how they speak to a nation that can feel very divided. And I was around halfway through that process and kind of that research when the January 6th insurrection happened at the Capitol. Capitol. And I'm not going to say that that completely, derailed the poem, because I was not surprised at what had happened. I had seen the signs and the symptoms for a while, and I was not trying to turn a blind eye to that. But what it did is it energized me even more to believe that much more firmly in a message of hope and unity and healing. I felt like that was the type of poem that I needed to write, and it was the type of poem that the country and the world needed to hear.
Were there particular images from January 6th that that were kind of foremost in your mind, or was it just the totality of the horror of the insurrection?
I'm a poet, so often I don't work in images, I work in words and text. And so what I was actually doing is, while keeping my mental sanity, looking through the tweets and the messages and the articles and seeing what stood out. And there was a line in the poem that you might have heard, which is, we've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it. And I got that actually from looking through a few tweets and a lot of people being like, wow, this is what happens when people don't want to share the country with the rest of us. And so I took that, which often became a meme on Twitter, and I put that in the poem.
It's so interesting to me that you're not thinking visual, that it's not the images that motivate you, it's the text, the words that you come across.
Right. To me, words matter, and I think that's kind of what made this inauguration that much more sentimental and special. We've seen over the past few years the ways in which the power of words has been violated and misappropriated. And what I wanted to do is to kind of reclaim poetry as that site in which we can re-purify, re-sanctify not only the Capitol building, which we saw violated, but the power of words, and to invest that in kind of the highest office of the land.
I want to read just the last few lines of your poem, and I apologize because I'm not going to do it justice as it should be done. But you said, "We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it." I got shivers when you said that. I mean, that is what it takes, isn't it? It's bravery. It takes bravery to see it and to be that light.
Right. Well, I think that recitation was great. I should have had you up there with me. That was amazing. But, I'm so grateful you brought up the last line. It's something that I've been seeing a lot of people repeat. And to be honest, I was concerned of whether I should include that last line of be it at all. I was kind of deliberating between see it, be it, free it. And then I said, you know what, we need all of these things at once. We need that cacophony. We need to realize that hope isn't something that we ask of others. It's something that we have to demand from ourselves. And that's what I wanted the poem to end on.
I had a form of dyslexia as a child and a kind of a minor speech issue, so slight little stutter. And Joe Biden has talked about this. I read that you had some form of a speech impediment or may still have, which is obviously something you would have in common with President Biden. He's talked often about overcoming it. And I understand that you use writing to cope with it, to share your voice that way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm proud to be in the speech difficulty club with you and President Biden and also Maya Angelou. Growing up, I had a speech impediment, and for me, it wasn't stutter. It was, dropping a whole swath of letters in the alphabet. So for, I want to say, most of my life, up until 2 or maybe 3 years ago, I couldn't say the letter R. Even to this day, sometimes I struggle with it, which is difficult when you have a poem in which you say rise like 5 times. And so for me, I used writing, one, as a form of self-expression to get my voice on the page, but then it also metamorphosized into its own speech pathology. So the more that I recited out loud, the more in which I practiced spoken word in that tradition, the more I was able to teach myself how to pronounce these letters, which for so long had been my greatest impediment.
I understand. Was there? I know there were some Hamilton references today. I caught as a big fan of Hamilton, and I know Lin-Manuel Miranda also caught them because I know I saw those tweets going around. But I understand. Is there something about some of the stuff that Aaron Burr said in Hamilton that you use for your speech?
Right. So like I said, it was as recent as college that I was still struggling to say the R sound. And so one thing that I would do to try to train myself to say it is I would listen to the song Aaron Burr, Sir, which is just packed with R's. And I would try to keep up with Leslie Odom Jr. as he's, doing this amazing rap. And I'd say, if I can train myself to do this song, then I can train myself to say this letter. And so that's been a huge part of my own speech pathology. It's why I included it in the inaugural poem. Also beyond that, I think Hamilton is just such a great kind of American cultural piece of what it means to be a better country. It was really hard for me not just to copy and paste my shot and email it to me. Here's my poem.
No one would have noticed. Yeah.
No one would have noticed. But I cite my sources, which is why I tweeted about Hamilton. I'm really proud that I was able to incorporate that in there.
I understand you have a mantra that you say before every reading you give. Can you reveal what that is?
Certainly. I do it whenever I perform, and I definitely did it this time. And I close my eyes and I say, I'm the daughter of Black writers. We are descended from freedom fighters who broke their chains and changed the world. They call me.
Wow. Wow, you're awesome. I'm so transfixed. Your mom must just be so proud of you and your whole family. And you must be so proud of them.
Yeah, I say, I'm proud of us because this really takes a village. I have so many supporters, so many organizations that have supported me, whether it be Urban Word, the National Youth Poet Laureate Program, or White Girl LA, where I got a lot of free creative writing resources when I was that skinny girl with a speech impediment who needed a mentor. My mom is actually filming me right now as I do this interview. So like I said, it takes all of us being present and lifting me up to climb this mountain.
Well, Mom, congratulations. You've certainly done an amazing, amazing job. Lastly, Hillary Clinton tweeted a picture of you two from the inauguration today saying, wasn't at the Amanda Gorman's poem just stunning? She's promised to run for president in 2036, and I, for one, can't wait. President Gorman has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Madam President Gorman, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people like the sound of that today. Thank you so much. It's just thrilling to see such a bright talent suddenly burst like a supernova. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now what we'll do, we'll just go on and get into the discussion because of the time factor aspect of it. And then I'll make sure that I express to the viewing audience that they should go and Google YouTube and get all the other goodies, if you will, about her background. Because he did mention talked about her background a bit. But they've got some pieces in there that really gets into her background and where she went to school, her friends, and they've even got the speech out there, the whole 9 yards. Now we haven't done the speech yet, right? We've done enough of it though, to a point that because I really want to make sure that I get you guys to respond to what they saw. See, because that's the other thing with the driving force. Because a lot of people just didn't look at it. You know what I mean? Media did everything they could to get it out there. But a lot of times we just saw that blackface and what the divide that we're having in our country today, they turned it off. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that in all due respect, I checked out Fox during that particular time. They did not respond in a kind of like a positive way aspect of it. And that's the reason why we played Anderson, because there was this back and forth routine between Fox and CNN as far as their reporters. You see what I'm saying? And we getting ready to go through that era again. We don't need that, if you will. And I think if they gave some respect to Trump, if you will, in terms of the positive things that he did, if you will, now, but at the same time, the person who's sitting in that chair right now is President-elect Biden, and then we're going to be looking at what he has said he's going to do. And now we'll keep a closer look at it and making sure that it involves everybody. So now you see where I'm coming from? So that's what we're going to do. The point of the matter is that there's a lot of material there on your visual screen, and I'm talking about your phone. The phone that we're all publishers at this point in time.
Right.
You can exit our YouTube. You can go to YouTube on your TV, the whole 9 yards, and you can get quite a background and introduction. And I'm sure that all of you will have different kinds of feelings about what it meant to you. And for those who are politically motivated, you got a piece there also too. But so that's what we're going to do. And so what we're going to do now is that I'm going to spend some time with Liz and Jack, and we're going to give you a feel for what I'm looking at and what I'm sharing with you right now as to what's expected, and in essence, that you can get the full value of what we're trying to say. Okay, no, not criticism. We don't need criticism. The idea is that we've got a tough road right now, and we've all got to be together to solve the problem that we're into right now. Race is a big issue. Race is a big issue. Hate is a big issue aspect of it. And yes, it goes back to Lincoln's time. And now we're talking about Lincoln, which in all due respect, and from my viewpoint, had he not been shot at that point in time, we'd have a different world today. It really would have, because he would have been elected president. We would have gone through that crisis aspect of it, because slavery was definitely there during his era, if you will. And then the progression would have been bang. Each president would have gone through, and by the day, it'd be just everybody's just like anything else. You want a roof over your head, and you want to eat. You got to make a buck. So the bottom line is, why don't we do that? And I'm just going to get right on in there, and because both Liz and Jack have both had the opportunity to look at some of those videos, if you will. And I just want, with doing that, and you got to get a sense of what do they feel about what they saw and what they got out of it, and does it relate, if you will, to us as a country in terms of getting our act together. Liz, let's start with you. How's that?
Well, I'm just overwhelmed with the poetry that was written by such a young Black female, and how she didn't leave out anything and in terms of the issues that Blacks face in America today. And I mean, I can take one of the things that she said in her poem was, "We have braved the belly of the beast." That has so many meanings to me. When she talked about we have braved the belly of the beast, it's almost like we have overcome, and we just have to clean up clean up the destruction that has been caused as a result of that. But when she talked about we have braved the belly of the beast, I look at American slavery. Then I look at racism in America. Then I look at gentrification in America. Then I look at speedy trial by your peers in the municipal system. Then I look at representation, no representation. Then I look at gentrification. All these things are evil, and they're created through a living spirit, almost like a living creature that is hard to pit, is hard to stomp out. So we pray. It's got a spiritual meaning there. We pray, and we just continue to walk by faith and not by sight. And good, we can see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right, that light at the end of the tunnel. In terms, can you talk to something specifically, maybe in regards to a solution? What do you see at the light at the end of that tunnel? Where do we go from here to the masses? What do you see to them?
What I see where we go from here is now knowing exactly what needs to be done, and now the fight is to get it done. We know our education system, I'm talking about Portland now, Oregon, but across the nation, our education needs to be, the curriculum needs to be revamped. The people that are making the decisions on the educational curriculum need to be educated regarding all the people, all the citizens, minorities, especially that live in the state. We still, politically speaking, Northeast Portland we need to heal, we need to fix, we don't have to reinvent the wheel anymore. We had a process called affirmative action. We don't have the affirmative action doesn't work. It's not working anymore. We had something called now we're working under an at-will state. If anybody knows anything about affirmative action state policy versus an at-will state policy, there was an individual that literally secretly went to the legislature and the legislature voted on this at-will state policy. That turned the whole economic system in the Black community upside down.
What did you mean by that? That's at will. What does that mean?
At will. Okay. Well, I'll just say at will as related to the Black community or minority ethnic communities. What at will means is that I don't have to hire you, and so don't even get comfortable with working with my company. Don't get comfortable with working for me because there is no career path here. We have there's I have no loyalty to you. I don't have to do for you what I told you I would do. And thus we're able to pretty much eliminate a lot of the racial class action lawsuits that my company has undergone. I can hire you and fire you with no reason, any reason, or no reason at all.
So where does that policy stand today?
The policy stands today is in an at-will state policy.
Okay. All right.
First, affirmative action said when you had District 18, which was this 18 square miles that consisted of a majority Black vote, so we had a voice in the legislature, we had a voice in city council, Multnomah County government. We had a voice to make decisions for our own that affected our own community. But now, and the Congress said, listen, you're going to have, if you got this percentage of Blacks living in this county, then you're going to have to hire that percentage in your company and corporation. Of course, people got tax credits for hiring minorities, but not today.
Okay. So that's not happening right now. Is that what you're saying?
That's not happening right now.
Okay. That's one area that we'll probably spend a little bit more time on.
Okay.
Find out where it's at, and then maybe share that, if you will.
Research gives us a lot of details.
There you go.
If somebody would just go ahead and research the difference between affirmative action and at-will state.
Okay, we'll get that. Okay, let's bring Jack in now. Jack, what do you think, bud?
Well, there were several lines in her poem that struck a chord with me. One was, this is not a nation that is broken, it's just unfinished. And I thought that was a compelling statement. I've lived over 20 years of my life overseas, and I can tell you the struggles that our nation is undergoing are not unique to other places around the world. But we need to focus on making this. I'll never forget, I remember reading an article, was an interview with the late Reverend King, and he was talking about having a discussion with a young man who was so excited about passing the civil rights legislation that was imminent. And he said, bigotry will not end until we erase it from minds, not from legislation. And that always stuck with me. So to me, we aren't finished, and we need to take steps forward to become a united nation that doesn't see cultures, but just sees American citizens from my standpoint.
Tell you what we'll do. Let's take a little quickie short break, and we'll be right back, Jack, to finish your other piece, okay? All right? We'll be right back, folks. And Jack, as you were saying, can you talk to maybe a solution to some of the points you were making here for the Portland metropolitan area, some of the issues across the country?
Well, I think that Amanda Gorman's inaugural address was compelling on several levels. One, the key words were, this isn't a nation that is broken, it's just unfinished. And we have unfinished work ahead of us to be a nation committed to all cultures, And we have certainly those challenges here in Portland. So what I want to see is us all work together to bring all cultures together and to stop the violence. We have so much work to do ahead of us to help reach out to people, whether they're homeless, and integration in our community, education from that standpoint. I looked at a textbook from Oregon a few years ago, and a friend of mine who's a former teacher asked me what I thought, and I said, what was the role of the Chinese American and the Native American and the indigenous tribes in Oregon and in our country? And he looked at me, he goes, yeah, we sort of cut that out. And I said, well, that's one of the starts that we have to make relative to education. We have to help people understand the roles that all people did and all cultures did to bring our country to where it is today, and to help us make the next positive step forward. So I want to see positive cooperation and collaboration. We may disagree, we may agree to disagree, but we need to stop this violence from all sides and come together as a country.
Sounds good, Jack. Again, like I said, we're here at the end of it. But like I said before, to you viewing audience folks, hey, do something comparable. Like I said, you may not have as much of the technical difficulty because you're in control. But the fact of the matter is that we've got to work together. And I think that was the message. And what comes to mind with me, Anderson Coop did a good job. I want to thank CNN for giving us the opportunity to be able to do this. And then YouTube was right there to pick it all up so that folks could actually enjoy themselves on an ongoing basis, 24/7, if you will. Any time of the evening, you can get this situation. And I guess just a couple of comments in regards to the interview with Anderson. The word words matter came up in that interview, and where Amanda basically brought it up when he was basically asking her a question. And the thing that came to my mind immediately was the whole issue of where we were in some of the areas that we still have to deal with right now, was the whole issue with Black Lives Matter. We really need to know what that means. Black Lives Matter and where we're going. It really has some significance there. And hopefully both of the major media will spend time educating folks about it. I'm talking about Fox and CNN, both. And even some of the local talk show hosts and newspapers and media for that matter. And I think about when I think about Black Lives Matter, the only thing I thought about was George Floyd. When he said, I can't breathe. Again, words matter. I can't breathe. What does that mean? That's very common, very simple. You know what I'm saying? That has a connotation of that whole piece. And so I think that's something we need to talk about. And then the word Antifa, and it's still out there. People still don't know what does that mean. And in many ways, and then you see all of these young white males, if you will. What does that mean? And normally, besides that, I've seen them carrying Black Lives Matter flags, as well as then the Antifa piece aspect of it. And then as I indicated to Jack when we were talking about this issue aspect of it, when I saw the 6 deal at the White House, if you will, at our house, so to speak. I mean, I saw these guys up in fatigues and whatever, and it just reminded me when I was going to boot camp. I could recognize some of those guys, if you will, in their fatigues, that's where they're. But I also knew that they had weapons, people had weapons, but there was no shooting. And it was a diverse crowd to a certain degree. There might have been 1 or 2 blacks there, this, that, and other, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of these folks were in uniforms. So words do matter. And spend the time talking about words do matter. And we need to get the education from the media. The media needs to educate the public. They've got the background, they've got the money, if you will, and they can focus on whatever they want to focus on. So it's going to be very, very important that we communicate, communicate. So with that, folks, Liz, I want to thank you very much for being with this group, and you're here now, and we're going to continue going and being a contribution, if you will, to where we're going at this point in time. We got 4 more years. We got a new president-elect and Joe Biden, and we still have another president, if you will, and you know what I'm talking about, and right up front with you. He's there, and he's going to be a part of the whole process. We talk about 50-50. No, it's not about 50-50. It's about 100-100. We're all together in this fight.
Exactly.
Forget about the 50-50. Let's do what we have to do, okay? With that, take care. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you the following week. and we'll get a little bit more right in front. We're going to get on board. Words matter. What does that mean? Get on board. We're going to be trying to talk about some specifics here in the Portland metropolitan area, here in the state of Oregon. Again, welcome, Liz. Again, Jack, thanks. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And Bob's sitting up
Thank
there
you.
looking at it right now, and others. Okay, with that, I think it we close. And again, thank you, Steve, very much for doing such a good job. And again, be patient with us, folks. This is community television. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye.
The hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.